It's Boomer Music Experience time. I'm going to give you some song names, Randy Helmo. You tell me who the singer is, the artist that we're going to talk about this month. Southern Nights, Wichita Lineman, Galveston, by the time I get to Phoenix. Rhinestone Cowboy. Who is it, Randy?
None other than Mr. Glen Campbell.
That's who we're talking about. Let's get this show underway.
Looking good, Dave. Well, first of all, we'll go into Glen's early life. Then we're going to hit his early, mid, and late career decades. And then we'll spend a little bit of time on his retirement and, of course, Glen Campbell's legacy to close off the show. So, Glen Campbell. Glen was born on April 22nd, 1936 in Billstown. Now, this is a small town, much like Simcoe, in Pike County, Arkansas. His parents, John Wesley Campbell, was a sharecropper, and his mother, Carrie Dell, she was of Scottish descent. And Glen, he was he was the seventh son of 12 children in the Campbell family. Wow.
I didn't know that.
Huge family.
Big family.
Now, his family went to the Church of Christ, and Campbell's brother Lyndall, he became a Church of Christ minister. In 2011, Glen claimed that his mother was Irish, and although his mother was born in the United States, her family had immigrated from County Tipperary.
Oh.
Well, that's definitely Ireland.
Yeah.
The family lived on a farm where they barely managed, Dave. They grew cotton, they grew corn, watermelons, and, of course, the staple, potatoes. Glen had reiterated they had no electricity, and money was so scarce. $1 in those days looked as big as a saddle blanket, Glen was said to remark. And to supplement the family income, they picked cotton for many other farmers. Glen said, this is interesting, he picked cotton for $1.25 100 pounds. $1.25, he had to pick 100 pounds of cotton. He said, if you worked your tail off, you might possibly be able to pick 80 or 90 pounds a day. Wow. Glen started playing guitar at the tender age of 4 years young. His father gave him a Sears-bought $5 guitar as a gift. His Uncle Bo taught him the basics of how to play the guitar. And Dave, most of Glen's family, they were musical. They, like back home in Glenstown, everybody played some kind of instrument and everybody knew how to sing. So he was born into a musical family. And by the time Glen was 6 years young, he was performing on the local radio stations in Arkansas. So here we have a 6-year-old performing on local radio stations. You knew he was well on his way.
I wonder in those days, Randy, that they looked at music possibly as a way forward, like to better yourself in life, even at that young age. I imagine, if you had the talent, you could pick it up. It was an outlet, both from all the work, but also something that you could grow. I mean, look at the amount of artists that came out of the South that had worked on farms is incredible. Like B.B. King, all of them at some point were doing something. And that music, that heritage, maybe through the church, or from, like you said, Glen Campbell's uncle, maybe that's where it all starts for these guys, this incredible, stage of life that comes later on, but they have to go through those phases to get there. Amazing.
Yeah, so true, Dave. Glen, he continued playing guitar in his youth with no formal training, and he practiced when he was not working in the cotton fields. He developed his talent by listening to radio and records, and he considered Django Reinhardt among his most admired guitarists, and later called him the most awesome player I have ever heard. Glen dropped out of school in grade 10 at the tender age of 14 to work in Houston alongside his brothers, and they installed installations, and later they worked at a gas station. Well, Glen was not satisfied with this kind of work. So what he did, he started playing music at local county fairs, church picnics, and singing gospel hymns in the church choir. He was able to find spots performing, once again, on local radio stations, and after his parents moved to Houston, he made some appearances at a local nightclub. So here we have the incorporation of appearances at local nightclubs.
Hey, Randy,
really as a solid base.
You as a DJ, and I know you've worked in radio, it really shows the power that radio had in that era, right? Like for new musicians, for new talent, because it was the only place to get your music played, or even to play. A lot of those guys played it live. You know what I mean? You got to think that's pretty tough. Like, you got to be able to know your stuff, and especially it sounds like Glen Campbell, being at a young age, was doing this. What is radio that magical? Do you think radio held that magic at that era?
Most certainly, Glen. Dave, I had the chance back in 1963, on November of 1963, the 22nd. I was a teen guest DJ to appear on our local radio station that year, CFRS 1560. And of course, we all know what happened on November 22nd, 1963. But going back to your original statement, Dave, radio, very, very important and very strong media, even in today's age, 2023. But back then, radio, it really captured the attention of those listeners. Granted, the radio stations, their power back then, like CFRS had a power of, I think, 10,000 watts. Well, today's radio stations are like mega, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wattage and all this, all the high-tech stuff. But back then, radio was very important. Especially families would adhere to their local radio stations to get the latest local news, what's happening here, what's happening there. It was a vital connection of communication amongst families, not so much in the cities, I would say more small town Ontario during the decade of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Just a thought.
I totally agree.
Well, we continue with Glen's early career now, and we hit the years from 1960 to 1966. In 1960, Glen moved to Los Angeles to become a session musician. And that October, he joined up with the group called the Champs. By January of 1961, Glen had found a daytime job at publishing company American Music. And American Music back then was a huge publishing company. And of course, he wrote songs, recorded demos, and soon he was in demand as a session musician and became part of the group of studio musicians later known as the Wrecking Crew.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And Glen Campbell, he played on recordings, as we know, by the Beach Boys, Bobby Darin, Frank Sinatra, Ricky Nelson, Dean Martin, Nat King Cole, Merle Haggard. I can go on and on and on and on. And even Elvis Presley. Like his sessions with all these other top name bands and vocalists was amazing. Unbelievable.
It speaks to how good of a guitarist he was and how talented he was at such a young age to be in that company, even as a studio musician, to hone his craft that early, that well. You could only see stardom on the horizon.
Exactly. And he befriended Elvis Presley when he helped record the soundtrack for Viva Las Vegas in 1964. Great movie. And he later said, Glenn said, Elvis and I were brought up the same humbled way, picking cotton and looking at the south end of a northbound mule.
That's a good one. I like that. Yeah.
Oh, Lordy. In May of 1961, Glenn left the Champs, and he was subsequently signed by Crest Records, here again, which was a subsidiary of American Music. His first solo release, Turn Around, Look at Me, was a moderate success. It peaked, though, at only number 62 on the Billboard Top 100. And Turn Around, Look at Me, this was a song that was made very popular by the Letterman back in 1957. But Glenn's version of Turn Around, Look at Me, I think, was just as good as the Letterman, maybe better. He aced that song. Anyway, Glenn then formed a group called the GCs. Okay, not the Bee Gees, the GCs. Got to pronounce that carefully. With former bandmates from the Champs. And the GCs released on Crest Records an instrumental called Buzzsaw. And it really didn't chart. It wasn't really good enough to chart. In 1962, Glenn signed with Capitol Records. Yes, Capitol Records, back in the decade of the 60s and 70s, the major record company. And if you got a contract with Capitol Records, you were in like Flint. Where have I heard that before? Where's Roddy Yates when I need him? So after some minor initial success Glenn had with Too Late to Worry and Too Blue to Cry, he released some other songs, and they didn't really do too well. Kind of a string of unsuccessful songs. Well, that was okay. He let it go. He learned to read music during the interim. And besides guitar, I didn't know this, Dave, he could also play the banjo very professionally. He played the mandolin and also bass guitar. Wow.
Yeah, he knew his way around, didn't he? Wow, I didn't know all that. Holy heck.
And in 1964, Glenn began to appear on television as a regular on Star Route, which was a syndicated series hosted by Rod Cameron, and of course the ever popular ABC's Shindig. That was the best musical in the mid-60s going, and it had a tremendous viewing audience. ABC's Shindig. And they had couples on there that could dance their butt off. It was a great show. Great music.
So this is sort of the start of him growing his audience at this point, because now he's on TV, so he's getting a larger scale to hear his music. But I mean, these are all little stepping stones along the way, aren't they?
Yeah, and very good stepping stones too, Dave. With the advent coming with his show in 1967, the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour, this is what really pole vaulted him into superstar status. I don't think I missed one program of the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour. It was a great show, and he had a lot of artists on there too, and I'll get to that a little later on. But just really, really tremendous. In 1965, Glen had his biggest solo hit to that date, reaching number 45 on the top Billboard 100 with Universal Soldier. So here again, okay, number 45. Yeah, Glen can do better than that, and he certainly did. Glen continued as a sessions musician, of course, playing guitar for the Beach Boys in 1966 on the Beach Boys album, Pet Sounds, which, as we both know, Dave,
Yeah,
was
huge.
the Beach Boys' greatest album ever put out, Pet Sounds.
That's
And
incredible.
in April of that year, 1965, Glen joined Ricky Nelson on tour through the Far East. And again, he was playing bass. Wow. I'll tell you, Glen Campbell had it all.
He did. He did.
Now look at the years from 1967 to 72. It's kind of from Burning Bridges to the Good Time Hour. And he teamed up with producer Al DeLore. Together, they first collaborated on Burning Bridges, which became a top 20 country hit in early 1967. Now, Glen and DeLore collaborated again in 1967 with Gentle on My Mind. And to me, Dave, Gentle on My Mind, and also By the Time I Get to Phoenix, I think those two songs really are Glen's signature songs, both songs together. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I didn't really realize that until you just pointed that out to me. I'm kind of always stuck on Galveston, to be honest with you, is one of my favorites. And I just, yeah, he was making, you could see, like you just described, you could see as we were going through this, the progression of his music getting stronger, better, more fulfilling. So, folks were going to pick it up and listen to it. And now all of a sudden this album breaks and it goes crazy, doesn't it?
That's right. Very true. And with Gentle on My Mind, of course, that was written by John Hartford. It was an overnight success. Well, it certainly was. The song was followed by even bigger hits, of course, By the Time I Get to Phoenix, later in 1967. And there's a song that a lot of people probably haven't listened to, but I really would like to share with our audience, Dave. Take the time to listen to this song by Glen Campbell. It's called I Wanta Live. It was recorded in 1968 along with the Wichita Lineman. But I Wanna Live. Listen to the lyrics of that song.
Okay.
I think I played that CD. Oh, Dave, I bet you I played it 100 times. It's one of my favorites from Glen Campbell. And also, Glen won Grammy Awards for Gentle on My Mind and By the Time I Get to Phoenix, and rightly so. Those songs were certainly more than worthy of Grammy Awards. In 1967, Glen was also the uncredited lead vocalist on My World Fell Down by Sagittarius. Now, Sagittarius, they were a very successful studio group. In 1968, Glen released Wichita Lineman, a song written by Jimmy Webb. And here again, Jimmy Webb, tremendous songwriter, and he wrote many, many songs for a lot of different artists. And but Jimmy Webb and Glen Campbell, a great 1-2 punch team for country music.
Did Glen Campbell, I know he wrote a bunch of his own music, but was he learning at that point, or was he writing his own stuff as well?
He was good point, Dave. He was in the process at that point in time of starting to write his own music.
Okay.
Yeah, starting to write. And in 1969, the song True Grit, which was composed by Elmer Bernstein and lyricist Don Black, sung by Glen Campbell. And of course, as we all know, True Grit was a tremendously successful Western movie in 1969 starring John Wayne. And that movie received nominations for the Academy Award for Best Song and a Golden Globe Award for the Best Original Song.
Wow. Yeah, he's all over the board. Wow.
After Glen hosted a 1968 summer replacement for the television, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, that was another great TV show.
Yeah, it was. I remember that. Yeah.
Anyway, Glen was given his own weekly variety show to replace the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, and it was called the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour. And this TV show, Dave, ran from January 1969 right through until June of 1972. It's a great show. The show's comedy writers, of course, included Steve Martin, Bob Reiner, two of the best in the business, like
Rob Reiner and Steve
Martin.
It was
made for success.
Wow. Yeah.
And at the height of his popularity, a 1970 biography by Frida Kramer entitled The Glen Campbell Story was published. Now, while Glen's session work connections, he hosted major names in music on his show, on the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour. Some of these included, the Beatles, but that was on film. David Gates from Bread, the Monkees. He had Neil Diamond on his show. He had Johnny Cash. He had Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, Roger Miller, and get this, Glen Campbell helped launch the careers of Anne Murray, Canada's own, Anne Murray, and Jerry Reed, both whom were regulars on his Good Time Hour program. Dave, what do you think about that?
That list that you just said for the era, that's crazy incredible. The musicians that he had on there from all different genres too. He wasn't being pigeonholed as just country and Western. He had a little bit of everything going on. And that probably, like you said, was because of his session work with such a variety of talented people. Like they probably were like happy to go on his show and, get that TV recognition and sing their songs. That's really cool. I didn't know. And Steve Martin too. Like, come on. Like it was all working for him right then and there. That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We now take a look at Glen's years 1973 to 1979. Of course, Rhinestone, Cowboy, and Southern Nights. After the cancellation of Glen's show in 1972, Glen remained a regular on the network television. He co-starred in a made-for-TV movie called Strange Homecoming in 1974, starring Robert Culp and also teen idol Leith Garrett. Now, Glen hosted a number of television specials, including the 1976 Down Home, Down Under with none other than Olivia Newton-John. And he co-hosted the American Music Awards from 1976 to 1978. And he headlined the 1979 NBC special, Glen Campbell, Back to Basics, with guest stars Seals and Croft, Brenda Lee, and he was a guest on many network talk and variety shows, including, Donnie and Marie Osmond.
Yep.
I remember those. They were good. Of course, The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, where he performed Rhinestone Cowboy. He also appeared on Cher, The Merv Griffin Show, Midnight Special, even An Evening with the Pops with Arthur Fiedler, and he also appeared numerous times on the Mike Douglas Show. So what does that tell you, Dave? Like his
popularity,
exposure and his specials. Um, he had it all, really.
He had that persona that was easy to like. You know what I mean? And he always came across as just that down home guy that was, happy to be where he was playing music. So I think that persona kind of helped him with all the TV specials and all the being guests on different shows, because he was that humble cowboy they could count on and get a good song out of it, and some good quotes too, obviously, by what we've been talking about and about his conversations. So it really worked well for him.
Oh, absolutely. So during the mid-'70s then, Rhinestone Cowboy, Southern Nights, both U.S. #1 hits on the Billboard Top 100. And he also had a hit, Sunflower, not as big as Rhinestone Cowboy and Southern Nights, but Sunflower reached the top 30 of the Billboard Top 100, written by Neil Diamond.
I did not know that. Sunflower.
How good is that?
I write that one down. I have to look that up.
Yeah. Rhinestone Cowboy was Glen's largest selling single and one of his best known recordings, initially with over 2 million copies sold. Wow. Glen had heard songwriter Larry Weiss's version while on a tour of Australia in 1974. And both songs were in the October 4th, 1975 Billboard Top 100. Rhinestone Cowboy, even to this day, continues to be used in TV shows and films, including Desperate Housewives, Daddy Daycare, and High School High. And it was an inspiration for the 1984 Dolly Parton, Sylvester Stallone movie entitled Rhinestone. How good! That is better than good. In January of 1975, Glen Campbell was awarded 4 gold records along with a platinum award for wholesale sales in excess of $1 million in Australia.
Just in Australia alone.
So now he's captured not only North America, but he's captured Australia.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Is Rhinestone Cowboy the most popular song you get requests for?
Yes, that's right. That's correct, Dave. Okay. Rhinestone Cowboy right at the top. Oh.
That's a good opportunity to give you a plug, Class CFM, Randy's DJ service. And we always sort of add that question in because I'm always curious to what people are thinking, like on the dance floor. You know, like you said, we got so many great musicians, and you only got a few hours to play as many as you can. But it's interesting to see the consistency of those big guys, right, and girls, that you got to play their song, don't you? You got to play it because that's what people want to hear.
That's right. And also Southern Nights, which was written by Alain Toussaint, his other #1 pop rock country. Here again, we're talking of crossover. Crossover hit was generated with the help of none other than Jimmy Webb and Jerry Reed, who inspired the famous guitar lick introduction to the song, which was mostly played in the jukebox number of 1977, Southern Nights. Now, also, and I remember this so well, from 1971 to 1983, Glen Campbell was the celebrity host of the Los Angeles Open. It was called the Glen Campbell Los Angeles Open on the PGA Tour. We're talking golf on the PGA Tour. How good is that, Dave?
Wow, he followed all those greats, right? The Bob Hope, you got to have your own golf tournament. That was the thing in those days. That was the era of the big time golfers. Was he a good golfer? I didn't even know. I knew he had the golf tournament, but did he golf? Was he a good golfer?
Yeah, actually, Glen Campbell, he actually took lessons, and he knew Arnold Palmer.
Well, that's going to help.
Which Arnold in himself was a legend before his time on the PGA Tour, as we all know. But,
yeah, and well, if you can get a lesson out of Arnold Palmer, then your game's going to improve pretty quick, I would think.
That's right. Yeah. So now we take a look at Glen's later career years, spanning 1980 to 2011. Glen made a cameo appearance in the 1980 Clint Eastwood movie, Any Which Way You Can, for which he recorded the title song of that movie. And from 1982 to 1983, he hosted a 30-minute syndicated music show entitled The Glen Campbell Music Show, which basically, Dave, was a spin-off of his 1967 The Glen Campbell Good Time Hour.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but that was good. In 1999, Glen was featured on VH1's Behind the Music, on A&E Network's Biography, and also on PBS's In Concert, a special in 2001. And that was a wonderful show. I got to see that. I made darn sure I was glued to the television that night. Now, here's something that I didn't know I want to share with our audience, Dave. Glen Campbell is credited with giving Alan Jackson his first big break after Jackson recorded with Glen's music publishing business in the early 1990s. And look at Alan Jackson. Yeah. He's superstar in country music now.
Yep.
Also, Glen inspired Keith Urban,
yep,
who cites Campbell as a strong influence on his performing career of country music.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. Yeah. Keith Urban's really good music. Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, for sure. In the year of 2005, Glen was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, and rightly so. It was announced in April of 2008 that Campbell was returning to his signature label, Capitol, to release his new album entitled Meet Glen Campbell. Now, the album was released August 19th of 2008, and with this album, he branched off in different musical directions, covering tracks from artists such as U2, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Jackson Browne, and Foo Fighters.
Oh, wow.
How good is that?
That's pretty cool.
Now we take a look at Glen's retirement. In March of 2010, a then farewell album titled Ghost on the Canvas was announced, and which served as a companion to Meet Glen Campbell. So, here we have Glen was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in late 2010, and he embarked on a final goodbye tour with 3 of his children joining him, but he was too ill to travel to Australia and New Zealand in the summer of 2012. His final show was November 30th, 2012, in Napa, California. After the end of the tour, Campbell entered the studio in Nashville to record what would be his final album entitled Adios, which would not be revealed until 5 years later by his wife, Kim Campbell, because he wanted to preserve what magic was left. And that would be his final recording, his final song, I'm Not Gonna Miss You, and that was from the same album. In March 2016, it was confirmed that Glen was in the final stages of Alzheimer's. On August 30th, 2016, during the 10th annual ACM Honors, Keith Urban, Blake Shelton, and others performed a medley of Glen's songs as a tribute to him. His wife, Kim Campbell, accepted the Career Achievement Award on his behalf. And Alice Cooper, we all know Alice Cooper,
Yep.
School's Out, described him as being one of the 5 best guitar players ever in the music industry.
Wow.
This is from Alice Cooper.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
So Glen's final album, Adios, featured 12 songs from his final 2012-2013 sessions. And Adios was named by the United Kingdom's official charts. Their official charts in UK would be similar, Dave, to Billboard Top 100 songs here in North America.
Okay.
But that song, Adios, was termed the best-selling country Americana album of 2017 in Britain.
That's
That's
pretty
from
cool.
the official charts. Well,
Yeah,
when you
that's
have the
pretty cool.
official charts giving you that recognition for a song or album, you know you've made it big.
It's incredible, eh?
Yeah.
Still putting out music. Like you said, sick with Alzheimer's, still being able to put out music. That's, to me, that speaks volumes. That's the passion from within, wanting to be able to still do what he enjoyed, obviously, and recognizing, still having that capability of recognizing that's what he wanted to do. I like that. I mean, it really makes me appreciate him that much more.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So Glen passed away in Nashville, Tennessee on August 8th, 2017, at the age of 81 years young. He was buried in the Campbell Family Cemetery in Billstown, Arkansas. Now, in June of 2020, just 3 years ago, Campbell's wife, Kim, published Gentle on My Mind, in Sickness and in Health with Glen Campbell. And this, Dave, basically a memoir of their life together. God, I got to get out and get a copy and read that
I was
book.
just going to say that, too. I didn't know that. Yeah, it will be.
No doubt. Yeah. Tributes came pouring in from countless others in the industry, including Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, comedy writer and actor Steve Martin, Sheryl Crow, Dolly Parton, Lenny Kravitz, and our own Anne Murray. Now, Campbell's former partner, Tanya Tucker, wrote and released a song in his honor entitled Forever Loving You. And Jimmy Webb, who wrote, he wrote many of Glen Campbell's hits and worked with him throughout his life, said that Campbell would play with any guitar player in the world, from George Benson to Eric Clapton. And he also added Paul McCartney considered Glen Campbell among the best guitar players in the world.
High accolades there. Can't beat that.
You know,
From the Beatles
we
himself.
remember the late, great Glen Campbell.
Amazing. There's so much there I picked up that I didn't know about Glen Campbell. Like, thank you for informing me, because there's just, like you said, now I got to get this book. I got to check out the song. What did you say it was? Sunflower. Like, there's just different aspects of his life that I wasn't aware of. And Adios, obviously, I want to listen to that album. I don't think I've ever listened to that album, but I'm going to definitely find it and give it a listen, because that's so important. When we were talking before the show started, I just remember hearing Glen Campbell, and I think I told you, I thought it was Galveston, at my grandmother's house when I was just a wee kid. But that voice always stuck with you, right? Like, it was very calming and inviting, and you always wanted to hear the song, because his songs always told some story, right? And that was kind of the fun part about it. You could, it wasn't super fast beat. You could hear the words, you could understand the words, you could feel the commitment to it. And it seemed like he always put his heart into his music, that's for sure. And obviously he did, because there he is with Alzheimer's, still doing an album, still finding a way to get it done. I don't know about you, but I learned a lot today. Thank you. Did you, when you were going on your research that you do you find more stuff that you didn't really realize about Glen Campbell?
Absolutely, Dave. I was just kind of, really? This and that, and all the different musical groups, rock groups, and solo singers, both male and female, that he brought in to his comedy, the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour, plus his TV appearances. He really commingled well with the music industry. He was like a natural. Like, he worked very hard for what he got, from the cotton fields to superstardom with country and western music and crossover music. But he deserved it. He worked his butt off. And we thank the good Lord that the good Lord brought us Glen Campbell for 4 or 5 decades of music that will withstand the test of time.
I agree. I couldn't argue with you more. And one reason I like doing these shows, and you're the guru. You do the research. You find out all these cool little stories. But one of the reasons is I think too many musicians get labeled with 1 or 2 songs, and we don't really know their background or their life or what caused them to become such talented musicians. And when you look at the Glen Campbell story, which I'm sure will be a movie someday, you sort of see where it all started, and that drive, that energy, the passion for the music, and how it just carries on right throughout his life. And good thing he found music. Society's lucky that, we got another talented person. So, that's the one great thing about our show. We try not to define somebody by their 1-hit wonder or 2 hits. Glen Campbell's case, there was a ton of them. But I mean, there's more behind the music, right, Randy? There's always another story behind the music that we got to discover.
Exactly right, Dave. You've hit the nail right on the head. Yep.
And
we remember Glen Campbell.
And you said, and I think I might have an idea who we should maybe talk about next month, because we talked about Johnny Cash. We talked about Glen Campbell. There's an artist in there that a lot of people don't realize, a rock and roll guy who spent time with both these guys, knew both these guys and enjoyed their music. And he's passed, but he was very talented. And that's Tom Petty.
Yes.
A lot of people don't know that
yes,
with Bob Dylan and Will the Wilburys. I think maybe one of these shows we're going to have to talk about Tom Petty. What do you think?
Hey, that sounds like a plan, Dave. Yeah, right. Sounds like a plan. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Tom, in his own right, was a good vocalist artist too. But then with this group, the Heartbreakers, they made a lot of great music together. Many hits on the Billboard Top 100. That's a good show.
And when you said Sunflower, it reminded me of his song Wildflower. I don't know why. That was the first song that came to my mind. So, we're going to have to do that. Thanks for doing this today, taking the time. I know you're a busy man. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. I've enjoyed working the show with you today and letting our audience know the many, many good works and songs that the late Glen Campbell has given the world, and done it in fine style.
Always classy, Randy Helmo. Take care, and thanks for doing this.
Have a good week, Dave. May God bless.